Okay, so I'm going to use Max to figure out and play with some ADSR. I'm going to be creating some ADSR from scratch without the ADSR object in Max, just to really look at the parameters of it and see what it does. If I make any mistakes, please correct me. It's my first time at the ADSR rodeo on Max, and this isn't a tutorial by any means, so please don't fire up Max and try and create this along with me, because I promise it won't be worth your time. So first of all, I just want to talk about why we need ADSR, and I've made this patch here. It's just a K slider going into a MIDI frequency converter, then going into a sinusoidal oscillator, then going into a gain object, and then it's just coming out digital to analog converter. So if we turn our gain up and we hit an A on this little piano, then we should hear an A sine wave. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. Turn it up a bit. Yes, so I'm definitely hearing that. The problem with that is I just can't turn it off without turning the gain down. But that's not really a sensible means of turning a note on and off when designing a synthesizer, because we're not really telling the note to turn off, we're telling the note that we don't want any volume in it. So we can tell the note that we don't want it by sending it a message that we don't want it. So I'm just going to send it a message of 0 and turn our gain back up, and then if we click this it should stop. Okay, and it does, which is good. We've told our note that we don't want it anymore, but it's not really a musical way of designing a synthesizer. It's a bit like having a car that only goes at 50 miles an hour or no miles an hour. Sort of having a design like that where it's either working or not working makes it prone to clicks, which sound pretty terrible. I did design an ADSR synth earlier, but I didn't design it right, so it was full of clicks. So if I have time, I'll show you that later and you can hear how horrible it sounds. So just to explain ADSR really very quickly, ADSR is an envelope. It's an amplitude envelope, so the A is the attack, and that measures how long it takes for when you hit the note to reach its max volume. The decay is how long it takes to decrease after that to go into the sustain. The sustain isn't a time measured. It's the only part of ADSR that isn't measured by time. It's measured by amplitude. So the S is when you're holding the note, how loud it should be then, and the timing of the sustain is how long your finger is on the note for. And finally, release is when you take your finger off the key, how long it takes to go back down to 0. So it's basically think of the amplitude as you're starting at 0, and you want to get back down to 0, otherwise you're going to hear some nasty clicks, and your ADSR isn't going to be designed very well. And the ADSR is basically the 4 stages in amplitude that all happen very quickly, from when you press down a note to when you take your finger off the note. Okay, so we are gonna, using this pretty primitive patch here, we're gonna design some ADSR from scratch, and we're not gonna use the ADSR tool in Max. We're gonna create our own using the line tilde object, which is what we need when we're working with amplitude. We've got our sine wave oscillator here, which is going to go into the multiply tilde object along with our line tilde, and branching off here we are going to do our ADSR object, and I've already made little titles displaying what's going to go on. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is our attack part of ADSR. So we're going to send the line tilde, we're going to send it a message of what we want our attack to be. And we're going to start at 0. And let's see, we're going to go to 0 to 1 in 30 milliseconds, which is pretty quick. So if I attach that, I'm going to put it under our little attack heading and bring up our gain. We'll hear our oscillator. When we press the attack message, we'll hear the attack we want, which is great because we are hearing it. But interestingly enough, you can hear that click, which is what I was talking about, which makes it sound pretty terrible. And we can hear that because well, our attack is going from 0 to 1 in 30 milliseconds. When we're bringing it back down to 0, when we press it again, it's just going from 1 to 0 in 0 milliseconds, which is, imagine, is very distressing for it. That's why it's making that noise. Okay, so we've got our attack, which is great. Let's make decay. So let's say we want to bring. We want to take it down from 1. Oh no, we want to make a message first. There we are, and we want to take it from 1 to 0.5, and let's say in 20 milliseconds. So yeah, lovely. I'll put that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these all up using the metro object within a time frame, so we'll be able to hear each individual part. So if I play it to you now, it won't add up because it's just attack and decay, no sustain and no release. But sustain, sort of like we looked at, sustain isn't a measure of time like attack and decay, so we don't need this line object. Sustain is when you have your finger pressed on the key. That's what's going on in sustain. That's the amplitude it should be at when you have your finger on the key. We don't have any fingers at the moment. We've just got this max patch, so we don't have any keys. Maybe if I plugged in my MIDI keyboard we would, but we're not going to do that today. So just considering what we know, sustain is a measurement of amplitude, not a measurement of time. We are going to go and put our amplitude measurer, I suppose. We're going to put it right there, just so we know that that's. I mean, it's going to be what we set out, but that is what the sustain is going to be when we create all of this. So finally, we need our release, and with the release, we're going to make it another message box, and we're going to take it from 0.5 down to 0 in. Let's make it really quick. So let's call it 10 milliseconds. And let's attach that to our line object again. So these are all the components we need for ADSR, but the problem is now is they're working all individually and we need them to work together. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a little. Oh, sorry if you're wondering what these two things are. It's just that's just what I ripped off from the max help, so I could record what was going on. Don't worry about that for now. Okay, so I'm gonna make a little device that will sort of do all of these in order, so we don't have to worry. I mean, if we did have to worry about it, it would be a matter of milliseconds pressing each one in a row, but we're not going to have to do that. So we're going to create an object that's going to do that all for us. Metro. Let's call it 100 milliseconds. I'm going to do counter 4. And I'm just going to put a number box just because I like to see where I'm counting for that. We're going to turn that on with that, and I'm going to turn it back off again when it hits 4. Okay, actually no, we're not going to do that. We are going to do a select 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's going to count to 4 for us at 100 milliseconds, which is really very quick, but that's okay, we need it to be quick. I'm going to go ahead and put 4 back into our toggle so that when we press the toggle it will just trigger the ADSR once. But that's cool, that's all we need. So 0, I'm going to put it there, 1, put it there, 2, I'm not going to attach anything to sustain, but I'm going to leave this as blank, so it's counting 2, but we're not doing anything for when it's counting 2. We're just going to let that 100 milliseconds go by with not doing anything. 2, 3, and then for 3 we're going to hit our release. Okay, so let's just check if that's counting. It's counting to 4, and then it's, yeah, that's what we want. Okay, so in theory, okay, it's not working because I haven't put commas in these, which I'm going to go ahead and do now. Oh yeah, okay, that works. So that is our sine wave that's going into like a really primitive ADSR, but it is working because we're starting off with nothing and then we're ending up with nothing, and there are no clicks in between. So as far as I'm concerned, that works. I don't think you should use something like this if you really want to work professionally with making ADSR in your synthesizers. This is just a very primitive little experiment to see if it worked, which it did, which is great, but don't use this for anything sensible. So one thing I want to say now that I've finished the patch is that I got something wrong, and the timing in the metro object made the timing in each part of the line tilde object, it made it redundant because I think my metro ended up being higher than what each part of the ADSR was, and I really should have taken that into account, and I should have designed that taking the ADSR into account. Not so much for the sustain, because the sustain should last as long as the user is pressing down a note, but I didn't really do that. I just shoved it all into one quick metro thing that timed it all. So it did work, but it wasn't very user friendly because you couldn't really control the timings of anything that was happening.